Have you ever looked at your life and thought, is this it? Maybe you've raised a family, had a long career, maybe even retired, or are thinking about it, and yet there's this itch you can't scratch. That voice in the back of your mind that says, there's still something more I want to do. That was me, at 55. Now let me tell you, starting a business at any age is no small thing, but doing it later in life, that's a whole different ballgame. And not because we're too old or behind the times. In fact, I'd argue we're perfectly equipped for the journey. But it does come with its own set of fears, doubts, and surprises. In this video, I'm going to walk you through my journey of launching a business at 55, from the moment the idea sparked, to the hurdles I faced, to the unexpected joys that came with it. And I'll also share some scientific insights and practical steps that can help you, whether you're 45, 55, or 75 and thinking, is now my time? Before we keep going, I'd love your help with something. If you're enjoying this video so far, comment Y below. If not, comment N. It helps me know what's working and what to improve. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Now let's dive deeper. So how did it all start? Well, to be honest, it wasn't some huge aha moment. It was small. I had just left my job after 25 years in the same industry, corporate training. I was tired, a little burned out, and unsure of what came next. Retirement was on the table, sure, but it didn't feel right. I wanted more meaning, more autonomy, and honestly, more fun. One night over dinner, a friend told me, "You've been coaching people for years. Why don't you start your own thing?" I laughed. At my age? I said, but the idea stuck. And that's the thing about ideas, they're like seeds. You can ignore them, or you can water them and see what grows. Turns out, there's science behind that feeling. A study published in the Harvard Business Review found that the average age of successful startup founders isn't 25 like we often think. It's actually 45 to 60. Why? Because we bring experience, networks, emotional resilience, and decision-making skills younger entrepreneurs often don't have yet. We've failed before. We've had hard conversations. We know what matters. And research from the Kauffman Foundation backs this up. Older entrepreneurs are more likely to build high-growth companies. That was incredibly validating to learn. I wasn't behind, I was ready. But knowing that and believing it, two different things. One of the first mental hurdles I had to overcome was imposter syndrome. I kept thinking, what do I know about starting a business? But then I reframed it. Instead of seeing my age as a limitation, I started to see it as an asset. I had decades of work experience, a deep understanding of people, and a lifetime of stories that I could bring into my work. And that's something I want you to really hear, because I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt too late or too old to try something new. You're not. Your past can become your launchpad, not your excuse. My first step was small. I started offering free coaching sessions to a few friends and former colleagues. I told them, be honest, tell me what works, what doesn't, what feels valuable. That gave me confidence and, most importantly, feedback. Within a couple months, one of them insisted on paying me. That's when I knew I had something. From there, I built slowly. Nights spent learning how to make a simple website, thank goodness for drag-and-drop builders. Weekends fiddling with logos and brand colors, and a lot of coffee-fueled early mornings writing blog posts no one read at first. But I kept going. And that leads me to the first big insight I want to share with you today. Start before you feel ready. I waited weeks, months even, trying to perfect my offer, my website, my niche. But nothing felt ready enough. Then one day, I realized something. Clarity comes from action, not thinking. That line changed everything for me. I didn't need a perfect plan, I needed a start point. And yes, it was messy. My first website had typos. My first social media post got 3 likes, 2 from family. But it didn't matter. I was moving. A Stanford study on aging and decision-making showed that older adults are actually better at weighing long-term consequences and staying emotionally regulated under pressure. That's a superpower in entrepreneurship. When the inevitable challenges came, tech issues, slow growth, rejection, I didn't spiral the way I might have at 25. I took a breath, regrouped, and adjusted. That emotional resilience? It's not just fluff, it's fuel. And speaking of fuel, the second insight I want to leave you with before we continue is this. Protect your energy. Starting something new can be exciting, but it can also be draining. I had to learn to pace myself. Not everything needed to happen in a week. I prioritized rest, movement, and sleep, especially sleep, which is linked to better executive function and creativity, both of which are crucial when you're problem-solving daily. Alright, so we've covered how the idea came to life, the science behind why later life entrepreneurship actually makes sense, and the two key insights that helped me get going. Start before you feel ready and protect your energy. Next up, I want to share some of the unexpected challenges that came my way, how I built my confidence, and the tools, mental and practical, that helped me stay on track when things got tough. Let's keep going. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. This video is for informational purposes only and is based on publicly available research. Everyone's health is different, so always consult your doctor or a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your lifestyle, diet, or exercise routine. Scientific knowledge is always evolving, and what works for one person may not work for another. Now back to where we left off. Once I committed to building the business, that's when the real learning curve hit. And not just with websites or taxes or figuring out Zoom calls. I'm talking about something deeper, the mental game. I had to face fears I didn't even know I had. Like, what if no one cares about what I have to offer? What if I fail publicly? What if I succeed and it's too much for me to handle? That last one surprised me the most, fear of success. Sounds weird, right? But it's real. There's even a term for it in psychology, imposter phenomenon, originally coined by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Susan Imes. It's the persistent belief that you're not as competent as others think, and any success you have is due to luck, not skill. And it hits people of all ages, but especially high achievers and people transitioning into new roles like entrepreneurship. So what helped? Journaling. Every morning, I'd write down 3 things: what I accomplished yesterday, what I'm proud of, and what I'm focusing on today. It sounds simple, but over time, it rewired my brain to see progress instead of problems. And then came the tough days, where nothing seemed to be moving forward, where I'd refresh my email hoping for an inquiry or stare at the blinking cursor of a blog post that just wouldn't write itself. And that's when I realized another critical insight. Progress is often invisible until it's undeniable. Let me say that again. Progress doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Some of my most productive weeks didn't end in big wins, but in quiet shifts, better systems, clearer messaging, more focused goals. It's like laying bricks for a house no one can see yet. But that foundation matters. I'll give you an example. About 4 months in, I had a moment where I questioned everything. I hadn't hit the revenue I hoped for, and imposter thoughts came creeping back. That night, I got an email from a woman I'd coached weeks earlier. She wrote, "You helped me find clarity I hadn't had in years. Thank you for reminding me who I am." I'll be honest, I cried, because sometimes all it takes is one voice saying, "You made a difference," to remind you that you're on the right path. And this ties beautifully into the next thing I learned. Impact isn't always measured in income, especially at the start. Now don't get me wrong, I wanted the business to be profitable. Still do. But measuring success by dollars alone almost made me quit too soon. When I focused instead on value, on helping, connecting, and showing up fully, that's when the income started to follow. This mindset shift is backed by research too. According to the Journal of Business Venturing, purpose-driven entrepreneurs report higher levels of long-term satisfaction and resilience. When your business is anchored in values, not just metrics, you're more likely to push through the hard days. And oh, there were hard days. Tech hiccups. A marketing course that made me feel like a dinosaur. A failed online workshop where only one person showed up and left halfway through. That one stung. But every failure taught me something. Like the time I realized I was targeting the wrong audience, or the time I undercharged so drastically that I ended up resenting the work. These weren't dead ends, they were data points. One night, after a long walk where I seriously considered throwing in the towel, I made a new rule for myself. Nothing gets judged in the moment. Emotions run high, especially when you're building something from scratch. So I committed to evaluating things 48 hours later, when my head was clearer. That simple habit saved me from making impulsive decisions I'd regret. I also leaned into community. I joined a mastermind group of other midlife entrepreneurs, some brand new, some seasoned, all figuring it out. That group became my lifeline. We'd share wins, losses, tools, even laughs over Zoom. I cannot stress this enough. Don't build your dream alone. Humans are social learners. A study from the University of Michigan found that having strong social connections boosts problem-solving ability and reduces emotional burnout. It's not just nice to have people in your corner, it's essential. That's also where I first heard the phrase, "Done is better than perfect." I had been tweaking my website for the 10th time when one of the group members gently said, "Launch it. The people who need your help don't care if the button is blue or green." So I did. And guess what? That week, I got 2 new clients. Not because the site was perfect, but because it was live. Because I stopped hiding and started sharing. Here's something else I want to share with you. Your story is your strategy. I used to worry that I wasn't niche enough or tech savvy enough. But the moment I started sharing why I started my business, the story you're hearing now, people began to connect. That's what built trust. Not my logo, not my pricing, my journey. People are drawn to realness. We crave authenticity. And if you're watching this thinking, but my story's not that special, trust me, it is. It's uniquely yours. And when you're honest about where you are and why you care, the right people will listen. All right, I can feel that we're just getting warmed up. So far, we've talked about mindset shifts, handling imposter syndrome, dealing with failure, and building a purpose-driven foundation. But in the next part, I want to get even more practical. How I structured my time, what tools made the biggest difference, and the strategies I used to build momentum without burning out. Stick with me. We're just getting to the really juicy stuff. So now that we've unpacked some of the mental battles and mindset shifts, let's talk about something that can make or break your progress when you're starting a business at this stage in life: structure and sustainability. When I first started, I thought I had to work nonstop to catch up. Like I was late to the party and had to make up for lost time. But that kind of thinking, it'll wear you down fast. It almost did for me. So I made one of the best decisions of my entrepreneurial journey. I stopped trying to work like a 25-year-old, and instead, I leaned into the strengths of being 55. That meant working smarter, not longer. I created a simple weekly rhythm. Mondays were for planning and content. Tuesdays and Thursdays for client calls. Wednesdays for creative work. Fridays to review what worked and what didn't. And guess what? I actually enjoyed my business more. I didn't feel chained to it. I felt in control. And science backs this up. Studies on cognitive performance in older adults, like those published in Neurobiology of Aging, show that while raw processing speed may dip slightly with age, focus, pattern recognition, and emotional regulation remain strong, and even improve with life experience. That means we're often better at seeing the bigger picture and avoiding distractions. So I started using tools that made focus easier. A digital calendar, a simple task manager. I even color-coded tasks, red for urgent, green for creative, blue for administrative. And I blocked out time for movement, food, even naps. That's right, naps. Because one of the most underestimated parts of building a business, especially later in life, is recovery. We're not machines. And unlike in our 30s, pulling all-nighters or living on caffeine doesn't feel noble. It feels like self-sabotage. So I started treating rest as part of the business. Midday walks, time with family, and yes, those 20-minute reboots on the couch that left me sharper and more energized. Sleep is productivity. Period. Dr. Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, explains that sleep improves decision-making, memory, and even risk assessment, all crucial when you're steering your own ship. So if you're grinding into the night thinking it's the only way, please hear this. Rest is not a luxury. It's your edge. Now let's talk about something that often gets glossed over, but plays a huge role in your progress: emotional energy. Starting a business later in life can feel lonely. Your friends might be retiring or settled into stable routines. And here you are Googling how to set up an LLC at 2 a.m. You might feel like the odd one out. I certainly did. There were moments where I wondered if I was being reckless. I had a pension. I had options. Why was I choosing the harder road? But that's just it. It wasn't about ease. It was about purpose. And when your why is strong enough, the how gets clearer. Simon Sinek talks about this in his book Start With Why. Purpose-driven businesses not only perform better, but the people behind them report higher life satisfaction. I didn't want to drift into retirement. I wanted to create something that mattered, something that outlasted me. But don't worry, I'm not saying you need to have a world-changing mission. Helping a few people feel seen is enough. Building something my kids can be proud of is enough. Your why doesn't need to be flashy. It just needs to be yours. That why kept me going when external validation was nowhere to be found. Let me tell you about a day I almost quit. My biggest client decided to pause their contract unexpectedly. I lost 60% of my income overnight. I sat in my home office with my head in my hands, wondering if this was the universe telling me to stop. And then I remembered something I'd written in my journal months earlier. I want to show my grandkids that it's never too late to start. That was my why. So instead of quitting, I pivoted. I offered a new mini course. I reached out to past clients, and within 2 weeks, I'd recovered the lost income and more. It wasn't magic. It was persistence fueled by purpose. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about one of the biggest fears I hear from others who are starting later in life: technology. If that word makes your stomach turn, you're not alone. I was terrified. Social media? Funnels? Analytics? It felt like learning a new language. But here's what I discovered. You don't need to be a tech expert. You just need to be willing to learn the basics, or hire someone who is. And these days, you can learn almost anything online for free or low cost. I started with YouTube videos and low-stakes tools like Canva for graphics and Calendly for scheduling. I gave myself permission to be a beginner, and that changed everything. You don't have to master it all. Focus on what matters most: communicating clearly, delivering value, and building trust. That's timeless. Tech is just the vehicle. I also stopped comparing myself to 30-something influencers with ring lights and 5-part video series. Their path is theirs. Mine is mine. And that brings me to something that can save you from a lot of unnecessary stress. Play your own game. I remind myself of this constantly. I'm not here to scale to 7 figures in 6 months. I'm here to create meaningful work, support my clients, and live a balanced, fulfilled life. If I grow, great. If I help one person a day, also great. Comparison will rob you of the joy of what you're building. Don't let it. So here's where we are so far. We've covered how to structure your time, protect your emotional energy, embrace rest as strategy, and lean into learning without fear. And most of all, we've talked about why purpose, not profit alone, is the engine that keeps you moving. In the final part of this story, I want to bring it all together. The biggest lessons I've learned, how to stay inspired when motivation dips, and what I wish I'd known before I ever took that first scary step. We're almost there. Let's wrap this journey up together in the final stretch. So here we are at the end of this chapter, but honestly, it feels more like a new beginning. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. Not just in building a business, but in rediscovering parts of myself I hadn't seen in years. Confidence, creativity, courage. I used to think those were reserved for the young, or for a different version of me. But now I know better. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. Starting a business at 55 wasn't the safe choice. It wasn't the easy choice, but it was the right one for me. And maybe, just maybe, it could be for you too. Let me leave you with a few simple truths that carried me through the hard days and might help you as you take your first step or your next one. First, clarity comes from action. You don't need to have it all figured out before you begin. In fact, you probably won't. I certainly didn't. I started with an idea and a gut feeling, and the details evolved over time. The more I showed up, the clearer it all became. So don't wait for perfect. Start messy. Start now. Second, your age is not a limitation, it's an asset. Seriously. You've got years of wisdom, people skills, pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, all the things that algorithms can't replicate. In a world full of fast trends and surface-level noise, your grounded presence is a breath of fresh air. Don't underestimate the power of that. Third, you're allowed to build something slow and sustainable. You don't have to hustle at breakneck speed or chase every new trend. What you do need is consistency and integrity. If you can offer that, you'll build trust, and trust is the currency of any lasting business. I also learned that you don't have to do everything alone. Whether it's hiring a coach, joining a peer group, or just having a friend to bounce ideas off of, community changes everything. We are wired for connection. And when you surround yourself with people who believe in possibility, your own belief grows too. And here's a little science to back that up. A study from Harvard showed that people who feel supported in their goals, especially in later stages of life, are significantly more likely to follow through and feel fulfilled. It's not just about accountability. It's about being seen. So let yourself be seen. Share your vision, even if your voice shakes. Tell someone, hey, I'm thinking of starting something. That's how momentum starts, with one small, brave sentence. Now let's talk about those days when the motivation isn't there. Because trust me, they'll come. Days when doubt creeps in, when progress feels slow, when your inner critic has the mic. That's when I return to this simple mantra: show up anyway. Not perfectly, not with fanfare, just with presence. Write one email, make one phone call, revisit your why, and then rest. Repeat. Small steps compound. If you ever feel stuck, zoom out. Look at how far you've already come. You're not where you used to be, and that counts for something. I want to leave you with one final insight that stuck with me from the very beginning. It came from a talk I watched by psychologist Carol Dweck, author of Mindset. She said, "Becoming is better than being." That quote changed everything for me, because it reminded me that growth is the goal, not perfection. Not titles, not even the business itself, just the act of becoming, of stretching, of evolving. If you've made it this far in the video, then maybe something inside you is already stirring. Maybe you've had an idea on the back burner for years. Maybe you've told yourself, someday. Maybe you've worried that your best chances are behind you. I'm here to tell you, they're not. They might just be waiting for you to say yes. You don't need a flawless plan. You don't need to know every step. You just need the courage to take the first one, and then another, and another. So what can you do right now, today? Start simple. Brainstorm 5 things you care deeply about. Jot down a few skills you've gained over the years. Yes, even the ones you think everyone knows. Think about someone whose life you could make easier or better with those skills. That's your seed. Nurture it, or go even smaller. Block out 30 minutes this week to research, plan, or reach out to someone who's already doing what you want to do. Let that time be sacred, an investment in your future self. Because here's the truth. Nobody gets to the end of their life and says, I wish I'd played it safer. What we regret is not starting, not trying, not betting on ourselves when it mattered. So if you're standing on the edge of something new, scared, excited, unsure, welcome. That's the sign you're exactly where you're supposed to be. We'd really love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions for future topics or questions you want answered, write to us in the comments below. We're here to help, and your input could inspire our next video. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on more practical tips for healthy aging. Here's to living your best life at any age. Here's to starting, growing, and becoming one brave step at a time.